I know I may pick on Victor to tell us how SCA went because I want to see what we missed in Houston. And Gabby's there. Hi. Excellent. Oh, and you're drinking the coffee. Okay, okay. Give us your feedback. No pressure.
Well, we're just about to pour. We're coming in hot
Yeah.
here. Can you hear us all right?
Yep.
Yeah, so coming in hot here, California time. Thanks for adjusting the hours.
Yeah, so you were able to make it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, we had a great time at Expo.
Yeah. Hi, Nick. Hi, Lucia. Yeah, we had a really good time in Houston. Was incredible. We were with Diana and Michelle. So we were talking about the FTC and everything, all the memory. But yeah, the expo in Houston was really good.
The big thing is that there's now a 35th chapter of the IWCA, the International Women's Coffee Alliance, from Ecuador, and Gaby
Yeah.
is the president and signed and spoke a little bit at the breakfast. So that was really cool. That was a big accomplishment.
That's
Yeah, thank
huge.
you. Yeah, it means that I have to do a lot of work when I go back to Ecuador. But yes, I'm in charge of uh, doing this program, this chapter, in these coming years.
So, Gabby,
So yeah,
what do you hope to accomplish by being the president of this new chapter?
so it's a team that I have made with six women there in Ecuador. So we developed like a program for the next 2 years, and this program is focused in helping in many ways the women in coffee, from pickers, producer until the end, until some coffee shops. So we have like 10 small programs that we have to focus in the next 2 years.
What's three of those programs?
Well, three.
Yeah, top
Okay,
three.
number one is mental health for some pickers and producers. Second one is be part of these local fairs, expose their products there with our help. And the third one is like fermentation, cupping, or roasting levels. Like we participate and we covered almost the whole value chain, the coffee chain. So,
Wow. So, Gabby, what do you mean by mental health? Does that include like therapy? Is it talking? Like how can you tackle this giant issue?
so maybe this part Victor now can he wants to talk because now he is part of a board of an NGO called Sana that is focused in mental health in the women in coffee.
That first sip tasting real good.
I
Yeah.
I really
Well, I
like
can't speak.
this version of it cuz
Well, which one is it?
it's the resident.
Oh, the resident. Okay.
Yeah, I like this version. I think it's more appropriately matched to the coffee, to what we intended.
Well, I know you prioritize body, and I definitely feel that here.
Yeah, I prioritize
Um,
the texture and some juiciness. But sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Um, well, I can't speak to what's happening in Ecuador, but yeah, Lucia Bawot, who published the book We Belong, um, which is an anthology of stories and photography of women in coffee in Colombia. As she was interviewing those women, she realized there was an unmet need for mental health care, and she ran a pilot program called
Brings to mind.
Beans to Mind. Pretty good name.
Yeah.
Um, that brought psychologists through telehealth to engage the women, and it was really successful. So now she started the nonprofit called Sana to basically keep that program going. And I was invited to participate in the board and was honored to say yes to assist with the technology because we need to set up some management software and stuff for the org, and then there's sort of a data collection and analysis um, need. once you have this program going. So yeah, we were able to meet in person at Expo, and Lucia spoke about her journey in coffee, the mental health situation. So for us, what we're doing is we're fundraising and we're hiring psychologists based in Colombia and building out their system and practice, and then using local contacts will essentially have the telehealth presence.
Yeah, so the women can take like therapy by calls if they don't have enough internet to connect by video call, or by video call like weekly for 5 months. So after 5 months, they measure if they are feeling better, if they want to do again, if they are improving their lives in some way. So we want to do like something similar, but of course, I'm a different association of women, focus just in Ecuador and in a specific place because we are very new in this. But maybe it's a good idea. So
That's really cool. That's the first type of program of this kind that I have heard of. Lowell, you just turned your camera on. Do you have a comment? Do you want to add something to this?
Well, one, I'd like to say congratulations. I think mental health is a place where there's not a lot of competition. So congratulations on coming up with that idea. We stumbled upon that here in Santa Elena because one of our coffee producers, their daughter graduated with a degree in psychology, and then didn't have a lot of work. So we started funding her to have office hours for therapy in our community. And she's worth every penny that we spend on her. The need for people to get in the habit of thinking about their mental health instead of ignoring it is amazing. And one of the things she does, we have issues with, I think, like a high suicide rate of youth in our community, at least high for the number of people that are here. And so she does things. They just did over Easter weekend or Easter week, they did a camping trip. And so they're doing kind of like youth organizational things where the kids are going and doing constructive things like going camping. And they didn't leave Santa Elena, they went camping at a farm and went to a waterfall. And so really, really important stuff. And I congratulate you on it. It's something here that we stumbled upon, and it's very, very rewarding um, and needed.
I'd love to talk more with you about that. I'm sure Lucia would love to connect to and maybe meet with that woman and find out what she's been doing more specifically, and anything that we can learn from her would be amazing.
Yeah, she's a Spanish speaker, but she also recently got a job with USAID, and they're doing, um, I guess when the coffee pickers go out, they have um, this is what I think is going on. They have places for the kids to stay, and so they're offering mental health services for those places where the kids are have daycare and things like that. So yeah, she would be, a wealth of knowledge on what our experience was like here in Santa Elena, and she's from here, and she's the daughter of a coffee farmer, and super educated. And now she's working with USAID. So I'd be happy to if you maybe just um, maybe I'll just put a message in the Discord, producer to producer, and I'll try and contact you, make the connection.
Thank you so much.
No, thanks for chiming in with that, Lowell. I think that's one of the kind of unexpected results of some of these office hours is being able to kind of share our experiences, because a lot of the times, you feel so isolated. We're physically isolated because we're off on farms, or you're just like so focused on harvest and something happens. And so we've had a couple of sessions where it almost feels like therapy, like group therapy, where we can share. We've had, horrible yields this year, or there's this terrible drought and this happened, or, rain washed away all of our, all of our flowers. So we know we're going to have a difficult year ahead of us, or, something like that, that happens to so many of us. And when you share it, things are still challenging and still difficult, but knowing that someone else knows what you're going through, or that you're not the only person, obviously you're not the only person that this has ever happened to, but sometimes it can feel that way. So I love that you guys are putting that effort into even just addressing mental health. And I just want to remind the community here that this is a place for that too. It's a place to share what we're going through. So just to remind you, it's helpful if you want to say something, to turn on your camera, kind of give me a little a wave, and it's a very loose conversation. I kind of call on people and we just generally hang out. So I'm going to go over to the chat. Also, if you don't want to turn on your video and ask a question, there is a chat function on the side of Discord, and then you can put your question in there and we can read it that way. So I see that Paolo has a question about actually the episode and naturals. So I think we're going to bounce there. We can chat about naturals for a little bit, and then maybe Gaby, I'll come back to you so you can share a little bit later just about the coffee realities in Ecuador, because we really haven't had anybody from Ecuador join these conversations before. So it'd be great to have your perspective. So you have some time to think about that. Okay, so in the chat, Paolo was asking, can you tell us more about the types of yeast used in your natural process and how it affected the fermentation of the natural coffee? In Ethiopia, there are still differences between washed and natural coffees, yet they follow proper processing methods. Can you explain what kinds of fermentation occur in African naturals that did not occur in your yeast-controlled naturals? Okay, so this is excellent because a couple of things. If you didn't listen to episode 71 or 69, where I talk about naturals, the goal was to process, to blur the lines of processing and make our washed coffees taste a little more natural. Our natural coffees can taste more like washed, and really focus on the flavors that we want and not necessarily the infrastructure. Not saying, oh, to get a natural flavor, I have to have a bunch of raised beds, or to get a washed coffee, I need to invest in an entire wet mill setup. So my goal is to kind of break free from those chains. But to Paolo's point, I think that most of what I talked about in episode 71 is that by default, Latin naturals have just been really funky because we have very different climate. We have much more humidity, we have less labor. So when you have high moisture content, when you have riper coffee, you also have, go ahead.
I listen to time,
Yeah. No. So I'm just explaining for everybody else.
I'm prepared.
No, your question is great. I'm just giving context back. So I'm saying that Latin naturals have had a history of becoming funky. I don't know how they could not have gotten this way with these challenges, with the humidity, with the lack of labor, and with the lack of, education of this is what a proper African natural tastes like. And so by cleaning it up, that's how we approach closer to the wash process. But what Paolo's saying is absolutely right. In Africa, where they do both of these processes and they're both done well, they still taste different. So there is a distinction. Those processes are not blurred. There's a clear distinction between the fruitiness of, you can still get bright fruitiness in a dry processed natural, and our their wash coffees still have this line. So when it's done properly, these are two separate product lines. And yet I'm saying, because of the way that we've done it, these product lines are collapsing. So I understand that it is confusing, and you're right. And I think that the way that why both are true, why it's true that these are separate and then also they can be collapsed, I think is in somebody's level of experience. So I think that when you are newer, when you don't have as much experience, your palate is not as sophisticated. Maybe you don't taste the differences, and you could be, tricked into thinking that these are more similar. Clearly, somebody with a much more developed palate that has a lot of experience tasting these coffees will say, no, these are very different. Like you cannot collapse these two. So I think that what I was trying to be careful of in the episode is that I think most people would say that these coffees taste similar, but not everyone. And there are people that are very familiar with natural coffees and will taste these and say, clearly these are different. But that level of sophistication and that level of like sensitivity is something that most people don't have. So I'm talking to like the 80% of people who have a baseline level could think that these coffees are the same. For that 20%, like the real specialty people, no, I could not fool them. I could not say that these coffees are interchangeable. So I hope that answers a question on like how are these things true? And the other part of your question is like, well, what microbes did we use? And what are we doing? What was I doing in Guatemala that isn't happening in Africa? And I want to clarify the wording. So you said, can you explain what kinds of fermentations occur in African naturals that did not occur in my controlled naturals? So it's not a different kind of fermentation. It's just different microbes. So I think on the surface, it would look the same.
This is the difference.
Yeah, the same type of fermentation, the same type of structure. Yes. I'm just kind of putting in different ingredients into.
But your yeast change the situation, change the fermentation. You had you change the population of yeast and micro, and so you change the result that you have. This is the key point of your discussion. This is because you change in the beginning with adding the yeast and microbe different. You change the result. And so in Africa, you have a different result because you don't have the beginning of the introduction of the microbe that they use.
Correct.
This is the key point of your process. This is the key point. But it is possible to replicate this changing also making floating with the salt, making adding, I don't know, other micro, and a different result in natural. The change is in the beginning when you add micro. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So
can you explain this changing? If you understand what's happening inside the seed?
Well, there's nothing happening inside the seed that's different, right? Because the fermentation is just on the mucilage. It's just on the outside. So the seed itself should stay the same, but
the mucilage change. Yes, this is changing, not seed, the beans. In the fruit changing something. This is I want to understand what is the changing inside caused by the yeast.
So the yeast, you're right. So in Africa, the wild, native, local yeast there have a certain identity. They're a certain type of microbe that I don't have access to in Central America. So when I use a Pichia, when I use a Saccharomyces, when I use a commercial yeast, they're already different from what's available in Africa. And a really big difference is that those traditional dry process fermentations, those microbes are, it's a complex cocktail of lots and lots of different microbes, right? There's maybe hundreds of thousands, millions of different yeast and bacteria that are doing that fermentation. The ones that we were doing controlled, when we're controlling, it means that there's just one clone. It's just one same identity. So in a way, you would think that the flavor should be a little bit less complex because you just have a clone. You don't have such a varied like symphony. It's just one violin playing by itself instead of the whole orchestra. So I think that could contribute to the results. And again, they're just different microbes. So what they're doing differently is that they are still breaking down the mucilage. They are still consuming the glucose, but their outputs are different. The amount of acid that they produce, the amount of volatiles that they produce is different, and that's why you get a different flavor, even if kind of on the outside you're doing the same thing. The fermentation itself is still the same process. It looks from the outside like it's the same thing. It's the only difference is the volatiles and the amino acids and the organic acids that the yeast are producing.
So I understand from the episode that the interaction or the beginning on the micro, on the yeast, on the surface of the natural, if you interact with this, you could have the result that you want. You could have a similar result that natural as you want. The key point is the interaction with the yeast and the micro that are on the surface, on the mucilage, and so on. This is the key point.
I think that's correct. Yes, the difference is just that interaction. It's actually a very small difference, but it's the key difference.
Thanks.
Awesome. And now there's another question by Javi. So, okay, this is a question about the naturals episode I could not ask last time. I think the discussion about the slight difference between exotic or funky and maybe vinegar, or definitely not pleasant flavors, is really pertinent. Is there a way to identify these compounds, the negative ones, and maybe try to tell when things went wrong, even if we still find those flavors as positive? Javi, I don't think so, because these are not different compounds. It's not like if you find a particular acetic acid, it's vinegar and you know it's bad, because it's a matter of, it's like a sliding scale, it's a threshold. So that same compound at 10 parts per million is fruity and delicious and complex and you like it. And then when that same compound tips over into 15 parts per million, now you get that sharp acidity and vinegar. So even if you identify the specific compound, its concentration determines if it's pleasant or unpleasant. And even if you put those two things together, if you said, okay, I found the compound, it's acetic acid, I found the concentration at 15%, it's vinegar, then you need to include the third factor. The third factor is individual threshold tolerance. So 15 parts per million for 80% of the population could be vinegar and terrible, but for a significant part of the population, you would need to get up to 20 or 30 parts per million to then for them to identify that as vinegar. So you would need to identify those like 3 points of what is the compound, what is the concentration of that compound in the coffee, and then what are the genetics of the person for a person to be able to identify, okay, for me, this is beautiful and fruity and bright, and for somebody else is like, oh, this tastes disgusting. So it's pretty complicated to kind of like work backwards that way. I think it's possible, but maybe not as easy as just identifying certain compounds that are responsible for, bad flavors, and then other ones that are responsible for positive flavors. The other one I like to think about besides acetic acid and vinegar is the butyric acid. So for me, that's papaya. I love it. It's really tropical and it's great. And for somebody else, we're like, that's vomit. It's the same compound. It could be the same concentration, but because of our different backgrounds and genetics, we interpret that same compound at that same concentration in different ways. So I hope that helps. So Javi's making another comment at the time. Cool. So I think that answered that question. Tom, I might pick on you because I just saw that you joined the conversation. I don't know if you're able to talk. Maybe you're not in a place that you can, but if you are, because I referenced you in the episode, if you would be willing to share with the group some of your thoughts, because you're the only person who's actually tasted the coffee besides me.
Hey, yeah, it's a little early for me. Sure. The problem is I didn't do the homework, so I didn't listen to the episode. Is there?
No.
So what are you asking?
You don't need to listen to the episode. The point is that I mentioned that from these natural coffees, there's very few people that have actually tasted them. So you are one of the few people, you and Dan are the few people that tasted the coffees. And you made that comment
Right.
that if I hadn't have told you that that there were naturals on the coffee, it blended into the family of coffees that it tasted like it could be a washed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
anything like that.
that was yeah, I mean that was really exciting because that's what I like. I like what you were saying earlier about um I mean it's a tangent, but I've been thinking a lot about why do we talk about air roasting and drum roasting? You know, like why do we make these divisions between things when we're thinking about what the taste is and exactly how we got there is the technicalities. And so I really appreciate natural coffees that you're kind of on the fence because you have an acidity that gives this sort of structure and stuff to the cup that's not just kind of this big flabby fruit. Um, I don't know if that's a good expression. That makes you, you know, think I don't know which way this is, and that's really intriguing to have a natural coffee that has the qualities that we tasted in yours. And you know, I was just thinking while you're talking, you know, in a really basic way, since microbes are kind of invisible to me because you have to go in a lab and you know, or it's not the apparent thing you see. Whenever I've traveled in Ethiopia, I'm always looking at, you know, what's the practice? What's the obvious things I can see that are different about how they're working with the coffee and the landscape and everything else. And so for me, my focus has been much more on what's specific about those naturals um, with um, with some other aspects, which I think are it's really exciting to think about the microbe composition, the complexity, all these different things. But I have to think that, you know, this is in concert with other factors. So, you know, one of the things is night and daytime temperatures and sun exposures that are very strong in some cases. Definitely raised beds and thickness of coffee on beds. Um, Coffees that are like 2000 to 2400 meters. Specific drying conditions at those altitudes, which are very different from like Yirgach. I mean, Yirgacheffe is very low altitude. For Ethiopia, it's 1800 meters in a lot of places and very hot and very humid compared to a lot of Guji coffees that are 2200 meters. You know, there's sites, drying sites at 2400 meters. So, and, you know, obviously physical aspects of the seed, the fruit and the seed at that point, the amount of mucilage as a food for fermentation, and um, and I think seed density. Um, and you mentioned labor, which I thought was really important. The amount of labor available to bring coffee, you know, that's the sort of cultural traditions around getting coffee to the station kind of matters. So there's a lot there, but I think all those things form a very different picture than what you would find in Latin America generally. And I think you're touching on all those things. So when I do listen to the episode, I'm a little behind. I'm sure those things are present as well as the discussion about microbes and the compounds produced as the mucilage is digested. So
Yeah,
um,
I think the really good point that you mentioned that I didn't touch on because I really try to stay away from agronomy because that's not my strength, that's not my field. But
mhm.
I mean, we are at a handicap in a lot of Latin countries in terms of the, you know, the heirloom varieties that Ethiopia has access to. So I think that we can't discount, we can't just talk about processing without talking about how that processing is paired with the different genetics that are found. Who is that? Because that is like adorable.
That's this is Olive. She
Olive.
just, if I'm on the floor stretching, she's just got to, you know, be right there with me. So yeah,
Hi,
that's Olive.
Olive. That's awesome. What a
Yeah.
sweetheart. Tom, do you remember anything else from that tasting? I know it was a while ago. Anything else that you could share? Again, because most of the time, just to give you context, I talk about these coffees and no one else gets to taste them. And then the only impression is my own impression. So I'm talking about my babies. And that is not helpful.
Yeah, it's I can't. I remember, I remember picking out distinct things that I appreciated in the coffees that were a little bit different than your other guests that were there. I think they gravitated towards the more wild aspects and of the coffees, and I liked the subtlety. That was exciting to me that there were these very subtle qualities in them, and um, it was a while ago. I'm just kind of just getting up,
No,
sort of.
sorry. Yeah,
So
sorry to put you on the spot, but if we can talk about the subtlety for a second, because this is a concept that it's like I'm doing it on purpose, but very few people see that as on purpose. They're like, but I don't get what the big deal is because the coffees aren't loud and expressive and in your face. And I'm like, but that's not what I'm trying to do. Like for me, a coffee that is really obvious, that you can describe really quickly, that you can, put, tasting notes on, that is satisfying because you're like, I know what this is. But for me, I find the craft, or I find the joy in something that I almost can't describe. Like I want a coffee that is so subtle, that is so well balanced, that nothing sticks out. And almost when someone's like, I don't even know how to describe this coffee, I don't even know what to say about it, for me that's a positive sign. For me, I feel like a job well done, because it to me reflects it's so well integrated, it's so kind of smooth that nothing sticks out, so there's not much you can say about it. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, but I think it's often interpreted as like, well, then what do I put on my bag, or what do I say about it? And so I think that my challenge is like finding the home for these coffees, because for so many people they're not as attractive because they're not yelling at you, they're not like in your face. I'm like, I talk to producers a lot about, instead of like, if you're always getting louder, you always have to one up yourself. But my point is like getting quieter so that people have to come in and like pay attention to the coffee instead of getting, louder and louder in the cup. Anyway, just to, if that refreshes anything for you.
yeah, I mean, if you mentioned specifically which were the different cocktails of yeast that you had introduced, I could remember a little clearer. I would need like a cheat sheet in front of me to just do it on my own. But it was interesting at SCA. I thought you had mentioned in your notes you wanted to talk a little if there was anything at SCA that kind of was along these lines, which was that the company Fermentus, who's a huge global yeast manufacturer, producer for all kinds of industries, from I think soy type products to wine to beer, other things. They've stepped into coffee, and they had a booth where they were just brewing some Chemexes. And it was interesting to, I think, uh, contrast what I believe your approach is, what you're talking about, like what your kind of intention is, but with using yeast is to be subtle and to sort of think about this, this kind of like costume competition for the Halloween party where people just keep going crazier and crazier, and then it's like, becomes something else. It's really not recognizable as as like just coffee anymore. Kind of so dressed up. I guess that's a metaphor I'd use, but their thing was odd because they had picked different processes of Castillo from Colombia, and they named them like orange. It's kind of like orange sunrise, and midnight blue, and they give them these names, which which I don't know. It just sounds like really like going into a like frozen yogurt shop that you just don't want to be in, because it's like you don't even know what this stuff is. It just is like, I don't know. It's just like gross. And they were interesting. The one that was interesting was the washed Castillo, because I feel like I have a good grip on Castillo flavor, at least when I don't like it and when I can recognize it. And I thought they're very successful in modifying the Castillo experience, that the unmodified was very harsh, and had aspects I associate with Castillo, like kind of, and what their modifications through these yeasts were interesting, and also resulted in kind of an overall, like not just kind of isolating flavor, but kind of a syrupy body that you would perceive, along with the other changes, just because of sweetness changes and shifts and acidity and stuff. But everything else they did was just kind of out there, they did naturals and honey of the same coffee. And it was not subtle at all. And I thought it was interesting to specifically use interventions in yeast and microbes to address issues with a particular variety of coffee. That seems like potential, like, Catimores and Robustas, to increase the value by diminishing, not Robusta, but, diminishing something that cuppers taste and are like, is a real, kind of, it goes against a buying decision, which makes sense. But then sort of dressing it up in all these other sort of flavors doesn't seem like very exciting to me. So
no, I agree, and that's definitely part of my philosophy with processing, or how I apply the yeast, is I see so many, I guess the what is the word, the instinct, or like the first step for a lot of people that are like, oh, really into fermentation and processing, is let's use these yeasts to make my Bourbon Sidra better, or to make my Bourbon Rosado better, or to do, like amp up the geisha. And that's not how I like to use them. I feel like if your genetics already have a lot of character, like, leave them alone. This, I think, is much more for the Castillos, much more for the hybrids, much more for kind of covering up the things that we need, like disease resistance, that maybe don't come with great flavor. Here's a tool to help, bring up that bottom. So I talk about that a lot, in terms of, I prefer to use this to bring up the bottom instead of making the top even higher. I feel like that is less helpful to more people in general. So I really like to keep the use of yeast to some of these, less exotic, less interesting genetics, because they can bring some of that body in and the acidity. But Tom, I was wondering if you could share a little bit, since you have access to kind of more of the market, like, what are people looking to drink? What do you sell the most of? Like, what is kind of the temperature of consumers?
Well, I mean, in the last, 10 years, like our Ethiopian naturals, which used to be maybe a quarter or third of what we bought, are now half easily. That it does have to do with consumers. It also, the way we're buying coffee, and I think some people, not everyone, is, there's one harvest and we're buying it all, and we're owning it all and taking it all. We're not buying spot and bringing in a little here and there and looking at what we need, and then looking in the market to find what we need. And I just say that because it's like, it's kind of not I envy people who can do that, because going all in at one time means we just buy everything we like, and then we hope people trust us to buy it from us because we're excited about it. It's just kind of a naive, isn't a plan, and it isn't based on polling anybody or actually understanding what people want. It's kind of like, we get the good ingredients and we just put it on the menu and hope people just say, okay, well, they thought this was good enough to buy and to offer. So so I don't know how much consumer taste in some way guides the buying, or we're pushing it on them. I think it's, I mean, I think the demand for natural is very, very high. And so there's that. And then in terms of crazy coffee, we do all kinds of things, but they're very small amounts of anaerobics, very small amounts of,
Can you give
I
us an
mean,
idea, like percentage wise? Like, what do you mean small?
oh, you know, naturals might be in total 40% of what we buy. And anaerobics and honey probably 5%, and anaerobics probably 3%, 2%. And it's not just, you know, there's anaerobics being available, you know, people are doing it in scale, and they're not like crazy expensive or anything. They're in par with honey coffee, um, you know, price levels. But yeah, there's so many that that just, you know, if you were cupping 10 or 15 years ago and your model for cupping was clean washed coffee, and that was like what was good, and then you deviate here or there, you say, no, but I like this fruity natural and this is good, and but it has acidity. You almost had to justify it against what a good washed coffee tastes like when you bought naturals. You said, no, it's really clean, it's really uniform. And uh, and now, you know, that we've kind of just are off the rails. In terms of people not having that zero, that basis that we're all sort of saying, okay, well, this is good coffee. Let's venture this way and that way. Because, yeah, coffee can be multiple things, you know, like tea. There's many teas. It's not like there's one tea that's the good tea and it all has to taste like that. Um, but yes, for me, so many of the anaerobics, you just taste them and you're literally tasting every defect you were taught to say no to, you know, and trying to, you know, not just mentally trying to justify that, but physically trying to think, do I really want to take this coffee home and drink it? It's like, no, I don't. It's curious to taste. And that doesn't guide, you know, just the fact that something is unique to taste on a spoon or in a tiny, tiny cup doesn't, to me, justify going you know, full bore on that kind of coffee. And I can see other people have, because it makes their menu of coffees they're offering just really like, whoa, look at all these things, look at this and that. It's got, you know, it's louder. Even the marketing is louder. Everything's louder. And I just, you know, I appreciate the diversity of coffees available now. I think that's a good thing, but I just feel like you know, if you just, like, we're buying these other coffees to offer them because we think they're really delicious and we love them and I drink them all the time. And then there's these coffees, it's like, that's curious, that's interesting, you know, oh, look at that. But, you know, I don't want it in my house. So I can't, in good faith, push those coffees. I just, you know, it's just,
Yeah.
What's your company called?
what?
What's your company called?
Sweet Maria's?
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I should have done an intro. I assumed
Oh, sorry, yeah.
we know
Yeah, you were a
who
guest.
Tom is.
You were a guest fairly recently, and of
Yeah.
course, yeah, I've seen your whip. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't, yeah, mention that.
And there's a comment on the chat from Flint who says, this is for you, Tom. I think the Pedra Branca pulped you brought in was my favorite solid Brazil yet. I didn't get to taste that coffee.
That's a natural, yeah.
Cool. Was there anything kind of stand out about that coffee that you want to share?
There's not really. I mean, it's a car. I was down there a couple months ago. Come on, come on. This is the harassment. Here, I'm gonna get off the floor because
Very familiar with that.
yeah, yeah. If you get down, you're like you're a target. Yeah, the Pedra Branca, that whole region in Carmo, yeah, I think a lot of the quality there is like it's definitely not the Mogiana Cerrado type naturals that are just like you know they definitely have a little more complexity and stuff, but those are larger scale farms. Most of what we get from that region now are real small scale farms. Um, so yeah, they're you know, but they're kind of you know they're just nice with a little more character than your average Brazil from definitely
Cool.
from Cerrado and stuff.
Lowell, I'm going to give you a chance to say something, but I just want to mention that I want to still leave time for Gabby to tell us about Ecuador before our hour is up. So let's go to Lowell and then we'll go to Gabby.
Hey, I just wanted to mention that Sweet Maria is not just a company that sells green coffee. If you go to their website, there's, I think, decades of incredible content. And so when I was trying to understand coffee, I spent a lot of time there and really appreciate the hard work that Tom and people at Sweet Maria put into all of the content that's on their webpage. So if you need a starting point for coffee, that's an excellent place to go back decades of great information.
Thanks a lot. That's nice.
Yeah, I will second
That's
that.
great.
You've got articles, you've got videos, you've got podcast episodes. There's a lot.
Yeah. And some of it's really old. It's fun. I mean, it's interesting because I think people stay so much in the current moment that they forget, like, oh wait, this wasn't how people thought about things, you know, a while ago. And you know, I'm not. I believe many things do improve and people's understanding improves. And, you know, I think, Lucia, you've brought a lot to I mean, I used to write like fermentation, nobody knows what it is. You know, like it was just people would literally just punt completely when it came to anything about what is really happening with fermentation. They would just say it's a process of acidification that, you know, loosens the mucilage. There would be one sentence and there was just nothing
Mm-hmm.
to look any further into what was going on. And I think it was just the idea that, you know, probably Nestle and Ely knew and they just weren't going to tell us or something, or at least Nestle, you know, they probably knew it all, but
Yeah, they were going to keep it to themselves.
Yeah. So,
well, yeah, thanks for sharing and just reminding everybody of all of those resources on the Sweet Maria's website and beyond.
Yeah, and I should you know, take our notes from me and Dan and maybe put together something written so we can share the feedback a little more clearly about what our experience was with those coffees, because it was really fun. It was amazing to come see what you guys are doing, to see the place, to kind of understand it, how you're working. You're almost like this little sleeper cell working in this like larger coffee mill, which is really kind of amazing. Like you have your secret project there. Well, I don't know, and you're like embedded in there, and that's really neat, and definitely appreciate the situation where they're letting you, you know, or giving you that space to do that. That's really unique.
No, thanks
So.
for that. And yeah, if you could find your notes, I think that'd be really interesting for people to hear, not just from me what things taste like, but from other perspectives and other palates. So let me know if you can find your
Yeah.
notes. Let's
Okay.
go to Gabby. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, so what can I talk about Ecuador? So I don't know if you know, but we are very, very small and unique place. We produce, it's very We produce Arabica and Robusta coffee in Ecuador, but with the time pass, we have less coffee like each year. For example, we are focusing in this year because of the droughts and the rains. For sure, we are going to have less coffee. It means that, for example, last year we produced 250,000 bags. We produce and we export like maybe 100,000 bags. And this year, through this, uh, no, because of the droughts and the rains, for sure we are going to have less coffee. It means that for us is a little difficult to loud and to express our coffee that we have. But yeah, we have like a really unique varieties. We have this Típica Mejorado, this Sidra. So you can find in that really, really good coffee shops, really good brands because we have dollars. We are in a dollarization country. Our cost of productions are higher and we have like less quantity of coffee. So it's like this is our challenge that we are facing on me and the producers and the exporters trying to put some Ecuadorian coffee to the world. So yeah, now my job in this women association is to teach, is to mm, mm, try to find a way not to produce more because maybe it's something that there's another institute that they can do, but maybe try to improve their quality, try and other techniques or stuff that women can learn and then can have like a better quality life with more incomes too. So yeah, now in Houston we launched Best of Ecuador. 3 years ago, we did like Cup of Excellence for 3 years continuously. But yeah, this year is going to launch Best of Ecuador. It's like I don't know if we can compare like with Best of Panama, but yeah, with small amounts of coffee. And let's see what happened. It's going to be in September, and the auction is in December. So I keep you post. And yeah. Mhm.
Cool. And Gabby, do you have an idea? Could you share the kind of, you're saying because you're dollarized, your cost of production is higher. What a typical coffee picker makes, like what is the range that they could make in a day?
For example, we pay a normal picker like 20, even like $22 per day. But another disadvantage is or a challenge is that there are not people in the town to to work with. So more of the young people are moving to the cities to have, like, of course, a better quality life, try to find like a better job. So there are less people in the region to pay, but yes, the most um, the most the cost most expensive is the labor picker that is 20-25 sometimes, yeah, and we don't have like so many options to do, so we have to work with that pickers that increase the cost of production.
Yeah, and I just want to give the context that in Guatemala we are closer to like $9 or $10 a day. When we were living in Colombia, the farm that we were at was pretty similar to that, $9 or $10. So Gabby's talking about more than twice that just to do the same amount of work. So that's it's interesting to keep that context in mind, and then also for us, still don't have a lot of people. We still struggle getting enough people to pick coffee, to work on the patios, to do this type of work because it's hard work. It sucks, and it's not well paid. So I think that maybe Gabby, what you were saying, at least here, even when they've tried to raise the prices, it's still not that attractive for people because it's not just the lack of money, but it's just the lack of actual bodies. Um, Gabby, in Ecuador, or at least where you're at, do you have, when people come to work and pick coffee, do they live in their own town and just come for the day and leave, or do they stay for a season? And a lot of producers have to give them like housing and food and things like that.
They live in their own place very close to the farms and they come for the day.
Okay.
Yeah, because now the roads are not like because of the trains, the roads are not so good. So it's difficult if they have to travel. Even like maybe there are some people that are far from the farm. Yeah, it's difficult to have more people even because of the roads right now.
Cool. Thank you for that. We just have a few minutes. I don't know if there's any other topics, anybody else that had something that they want to say before we log off. Victor, what's up?
Yeah, just to go back to a couple points. Number one, I'm sad I missed that booth Tom was talking about with all the different fermentation styles. There's so much at Expo. I follow a lot of accounts who are critical of the SCA and Expo, and I'll say there's truth in all of that, but also there's so much good stuff that happens. I attended lectures on microfinance. I met people from India who are doing amazing research in agronomy and genetics. Um, and we met this woman, Dr. Itzel Morales from Mexico, and she is working in microbiology genetics research. I don't know if you're aware of her work, Lucia, but I think
Mm.
she's someone you need to meet, maybe even have on the podcast. And so she was
Can
talking
you
about
write the
her
name
research.
in the chat or like maybe put in her?
Yeah, yeah, I can send you an email. So this is a card she was giving out where they
Okay, right.
studied the bacterial population over time
Wow.
and in their ferments. And it's called Dynamics of the Bacterial Community Over Fermentation Time. The program is called Bioma, High Quality Coffee Project that combines science and tradition. And they're doing sequencing in the soil on the plants. And she gave us this lovely sample that also, has the test tube marketing with it. And the direct quote on here is dry processed and inoculated with a consortium of lactic acid bacteria.
Wow.
So um, there's other folks working sort of similar to what you're doing in academia. And these are the type of people that you get to meet at Expo. It's hard for a lot of people to access, um, but also a lot of amazing connections that you can make there.
That is really cool. Victor, could you put up what? Could you put the postcard up again? I just wanted to have a quick comment on that where I made it a little bit perfect, where you can see that not only is the diversity incredibly varied, but it also changes over time. Exactly this idea that it's not a static thing, and that's why fermentation is such a challenge for people where they think, oh, I'm doing the same thing, but my coffee's tasting different. I don't understand what's happening and why it seems so mysterious. And then just to contrast that with the controlled fermentations where you have one clone, one thing doing everything. And all of a sudden it can make sense why you can get that level of consistency with commercial yeast and bacteria versus a wild fermentation where you just have, a crapshoot. But you can also get really great complexity. And, it's not that one way is better. It's just knowing, going with your eyes open and knowing what you're doing.